Hello, I'm Jerry Pardilla, and this is my introduction for EDT 542. I live in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, and am an online student. My educational background spans decades, reaching all the way back to the late 1970s. I started out at Colby College in Waterville, Maine in 1976 and 1977, and at the University of Maine at Orono in 1978. I did not complete my bachelor's degree at that point. I went on to participate in legal training sponsored by the Antioch Law School and obtained a legal technician diploma in 1979. I returned to the University of Maine at Orono in 1985, and again, I did not complete my education. Then I went back into the workforce, returning in 2021 and ultimately completing my bachelor's of university studies with the main studies track in 2023. I also concurrently worked on a graduate certificate in Wabanaki languages offered by the University of Southern Maine. I completed that in 2024. I have an extensive military education uh, during my enlisted phase with basic training, advanced individual training. I went to Officer Candidate School at Camp Keys in the Maine Military Academy in Augusta. And I also graduated from an officer basic course at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and a medical service corps basic course, San Antonio, Texas. I went to flight school, rotary wing aviation training at Fort Rucker, Alabama. So I have extensive military schools and training. At this point in my working career, or essentially I'm retired. I recently retired in July. I have an extensive work history both in the public sector, essentially tribal government, the nonprofit sector, and then as a reservist in the Maine Army National Guard with military work experience. In the military, I was a combat engineer, platoon leader in the 262nd Engineer Battalion, and in the 112th Air Ambulance Company, a medevac company, I was a platoon leader. In the public sector, I was in Penobscot tribal government at various administrative positions, including directorships that were just after the land claims settlement period. So the early 1980s and throughout the early 1990s. I also was an elected leader, serving as governor, um, lieutenant governor, and council member. Those titles have since changed to chief and vice chief for those elected leaders for Penobscot Nation. In the nonprofit sector, I've worked in intrastate organizations, regional and national organizations, primarily around Native American issues and Indian country issues. I've been in the National Tribal Environmental Council, Alaska Intertribal Council, United South and Eastern Tribes, and have worked with a myriad of other issue-specific regional and national tribal organizations. I currently sit as a board member for Nabizun, which is a nonprofit organization in Maine, serving Wabanaki people. It's based in Passadumkeag. And I also sit on the Flower Hill Institute, which is an organization headquartered at Jemez Pueblo in New Mexico. So that's more of my work history. Um, Uh, on the personal side, I'm married. My wife is Marla. She's a Navajo citizen. She's had a long career in public health, including service with the Indian Health Service. She has served and continues to be a research scientist with the University of New Mexico and Johns Hopkins University, primarily focused on chronic disease prevention in Indian country. We have a blended family. We have five adult children, seven grandchildren, and one great granddaughter. Our family lives across the country from Maine to New Mexico to Southern California. And we have in our home our beloved cats and dogs. So we live again in the Rio Rancho, New Mexico area, which is essentially part of the Albuquerque metropolitan area, and we've lived here many years. My goal in retirement or lifetime goal is to revitalize the Penobscot language, which stands on the brink of extinction. Both my academic pursuits in digital curation and instructional technology would facilitate teaching the language and for adult learners to become proficient Penobscot or Wabanaki speakers. In my lifetime, I have experienced the evolution of the theories and practice of leadership from the 1970s to the present and, and from different sectors. So I'm shifting away from my basic personal introduction into the readings and the videos for this first week and focusing initially on leadership and leadership styles. And then I'll follow that up with learning and the use of technologies in in school and academic settings. So in the readings, um, I haven't, there were a number of leadership styles, 10 of those to be exact. And in my lifetime, I've encountered those common leadership styles that Kat Bugard described. And I could tell stories about each of those styles as either a leader or a follower. I have learned that it is important to know which of the leadership styles is your or my own preferred style, and also that there are times and circumstances when you must shift and utilize a different leadership style. Interestingly, that shifting process has been defined by Bugard as its own leadership style. So I thought that would be more adaptive, but in essence, it's its own style. What I also learned is there is no consensus for the definition of leadership or what makes good leaders. Peter Northouse asserts that it has different meanings for different people, and I agree with that. In my military career from 1980 to 1993, traits were a focus of leadership and leadership development. I can still recite the list of leadership traits today, 14 or 16, depending upon um, which of the lists will include humility and humor. But it goes like this: bearing, courage, decisiveness, dependability, endurance, enthusiasm, initiative, integrity, judgment, justice, knowledge, loyalty, tact, and unselfishness. So those are the traits that were hardwired in my development, and I can still recite them today. Also, the Army has its own definition of leadership, and that was hardwired as well. So it's the activity of influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission. So very mission oriented. Certainly, a military leader's character bearing intellect, technical and tactical proficiency are critical to building trust and confidence in followers who may face dangerous and life-threatening situations. Certain leadership styles do best in those types of scenarios. High on the list would be autocratic, transactional, and charismatic. Those dangerous situations are not usually encountered in civilian settings, perhaps only by law enforcement and first responders. So other leadership styles and approaches tend to be more prevalent. I strongly relate to servant, ethical, spiritual, and inclusive leadership approaches. And over time, what I've seen is focus has shifted from leaders to followers in the leadership process. And in that process, I agree with Northhouse. A leader affects and is affected by followers. So leadership is an interactive event. It's the relationship between leaders and followers. Further, Northhouse asserts that although leaders and followers are closely linked, it is the leader who often initiates the relationship, creates the communication linkages, and carries the burden for maintaining the relationship. Northhouse examined the trait versus process leadership question as well. Are leaders born with innate abilities and skills, or can leaders be developed or acquire skills? Northhouse did not definitively answer that, but he gave us case examples of yes and yes in his discussion on assigned and emergent leadership. So, with all of this reading and thought about leadership and a sense for what my own preferred styles are, I was anxious to complete the questionnaire in Northhouse's article or chapter on conceptualizing leadership to see where my views on leadership fell. So I took the questionnaire, and my top three emphases were process, behavior, and skills. Those latter two were tied. These results are consistent with my own understanding of preferred or natural styles of leadership. So, servant, coaching, and transformational leadership are my preferred styles. I certainly can adapt and use different ones. And I have had situations where I had to shift, and I could regale you with stories about that. But nonetheless, taking that questionnaire did confirm my natural styles. So, one intriguing point raised by Northhouse was highlighting Barbara Kellerman's argument that leadership or leaders' power has diminished and shifted to followers. Cultural shifts and access to technology have resulted in decline in respect for leaders and their formal legitimate powers. So that was interesting to me, but I see that this argument does not contradict the notion that leadership has different meanings for different people. Highlighting Kellerman's argument represents the ongoing evolution of the relationship between leaders and followers, and that technology can be used for greater transparency and accountability. So, moving on again to connect up our latter part of the reading on educational technology. One of the interesting crossover connections from the leadership styles to 21st century learning was technology itself. We learned from Northhouse's highlight of Kellerman's claim that power shifts between leaders and followers are taking place, particularly with greater use of technology. Likewise, we are presented in George Kouros's view that focus should be on the learner, not just the learning, shifting to empower learners to take control of their own learning. And in that shift, technology, when appropriately utilized, can be a learning accelerator. This educational shift will require schools and educators to level up, become innovators while minimizing risks to students, and focus on what we want learners to know and do, and select and master resources to create learning experiences aligned with the vision that has been co-created with the community. This really helps me to think that learning environments with educational technologies should be created so that learners can progress from literacy to adaptation to transformational usage with their technology tools. For learners to have adequate time to explore, experiment, master, and collaborate with their devices, with their peers, and far beyond the classroom. These learning types of laboratories can be practicums for skill building and personal growth opportunities. With guidance and support, students can learn and teach themselves at an accelerated rate. So we as educators can be the facilitators of self-learning and growth opportunities for students. Integrating technology can enhance their learning, prepare them for further educational endeavors, and serve our communities as well. Our challenge is to make the shift to the learner, focusing on ways to encourage students to take control and ownership of their learning. So those are the things that I had taken away from our readings and the videos for this week. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to this semester and our opportunities to engage. Have a great day.